welcome to another exciting episode of In Depth and Out Loud with me, Dubbz. Today joining me, a very special guest, Lolo Ndlovu, founder and CEO of Sneaker Shack. So if you are a student that is interested in starting a business, well, you are in for a treat, because today we're going to be talking to Lolo about entrepreneurship. Lolo, hi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and hello to all your students.
So before we get to the nitty-gritties, there's something I want to ask you, a bit personal. So say you're stranded, okay, on a deserted island, but you get to bring one pair of sneakers. What's your go-to choice and why?
Well, okay, a couple of questions. My business mind has to inquire, what kind of island is it? Is it a wet or dry?
Dry.
It's a dry island, okay. Is it sunny?
Yes.
It's sunny, okay. And it's inevitable, I'm there forever.
Yes.
Okay,
Let's put it that way.
Okay, cool. I think I would have to take these. So these are my old birds.
Okay.
Reason why I take these is because they kind of light, they breathy. If the island is too hot, I'll still be comfortable.
Oh.
I think I would blend in quite well. What do you think? Like,
I think you would. I like. They look very bright.
Yeah.
I must ask you. Tell us just a little bit. What does Sneaker Shack exactly do?
Okay, so Sneaker Shack, the basic model is that we are a sneaker laundry. So
Okay.
in other words, customers bring in their shoes, get them cleaned, to the best of our ability, and in 48 hours they go back to customers. So that's the basic model of what Sneaker Shack is, and that's the kind of the origin on what the business is built on. Since then we've looked at that entire value chain, from cleaning, and asking a couple of questions, especially to customers, what are they interested? What else are they interested in? What else could we build on top of this model? And I think since the sort of founding stage is about 7 years ago, it's really kind of metamorphosized into kind of cleaning that remains the base, and offering things like repair, and a lot of things that are becoming super interesting in the retail side of things. So Sneaker Shack is a lot of things, but I think initially, as a core, we are South Africa's leading sneaker cleaning business.
Fantastic. So I have a pair of sneakers, white, and I wore them. I think it was New Year's Eve. It was raining. It was muddy, and I kept them.
This doesn't end well. Hey?
No, it doesn't. And I kept them for about 2 months before washing them.
Okay.
And when I eventually did, I tried. I really tried. I tried my best, Lolo, but they still are stained. So can I bring this pair to you, and am I guaranteed that I'll get them back to that nice original white color?
Your first mistake is keeping them for 2 months.
I know.
I think that's the first mistake. Second one. Okay, there is no second mistake, but they could definitely be. We can attempt to bring them back to life. I haven't seen them, so I don't want to make some promises to you.
Attempt sounds good to me.
The moment you say muddy and white, it's a bit of a problem, and then you add 2 months to that. So
yeah, I kind of ruined them a bit, didn't I?
Let's see.
Okay, fantastic.
I'll give you a voucher after the show.
I'm excited because I know that you have 12 stores now.
Yeah.
When you initially started with one in Maboneng.
Yeah.
I'd say my closest one is Rosebank in this case.
Okay.
Is the Maboneng one still there?
Yeah, so it's not. So Maboneng was initially, that was the genesis, the kind of incubation phase of things. I think just for context, I'd come back from university. I was in the United States at the time. And kind of a lot of things happened in kind of deciding to kind of go down this route.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of, I was staying with my parents at the time, and, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to move I effectively moved into Maboneng. So that's what happened. So the business kind of happened because I was living in Maboneng. So that became the kind of genesis where we kind of, did a lot of the experimenting around the model. And I think once we got things right, it was sort of, hey, time to start branching out into sort of, let's call it the main market. Maboneng is a great market, but I think for what we were offering, it was just way too cyclical for us.
Yeah.
I think we needed a lot more consistency. We spoke about before the show that we needed a lot more consistency in that foot traffic to kind of get the model going. But it's Maboneng is place of light. It's very dear to my heart.
No, I love Maboneng as well. But let's go through your journey. What led you down the path of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I think entrepreneurship kind of, I was born in the path of entrepreneurship, if you put it that kind of, that way. Dad, grandfather, all siblings.
Yeah.
So I'm the youngest of three, and every single one of them, are entrepreneurs. Kind of an odd thing. I've never I don't have a reference to someone working a corporate job in my family.
Wow.
So you know, I was kind of essentially born into entrepreneurship. So I think those kind of, you know, thinking about, you know, what the future looks like, you know, what's going to be important, you know, not in 3 or 5 years, but in 15 years, a lot of that thinking, you know, I was kind of born around. I think Sneaker Shack specifically is interesting because I don't think I was looking for it. You know?
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you, how did it lead to you saying, okay, I'm going to open a Sneaker Shack? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I think, you know, in uni I was kind of playing with a lot of, you know, business ideas. I still have this book where, you know, I kind of write a lot of my thoughts down. And it was one of those that I'd seen. You know, I'd happened to visit a cousin of mine who was, you know, equally in the States, but, you know, I was in East Coast, he was in the West Coast, you know, went down there, kind of, you know, saw a lot of interesting things there, you know, came back and, you know, one of the things, you know, is this, you know, it was kind of clear, and kind of the data spoke to this as well. It was kind of clear that, you know, sneakers are becoming, you know, a real sort of centerpiece of the closet, if you will. So if you look at the kind of distribution share, you know, you and I would go to Cotton On, get a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, but, you know, your largest spend would be on footwear.
Yes, 100%.
You know, as opposed to our parents who would, you know, the largest would be the suits and the 3 pieces. So I think there was this, like, you know, change in behavior, and also kind of looking at this, you know, this care space, right? So, you know, if I go for a haircut, you know, I don't do it myself. I go somewhere and, you know, get a haircut, you sit on a chair and it gets done for you. You know, equally, I would imagine with yourself and, you know, nails. You know, I think there's a huge service element, and with this, you know, growing sort of, you know, consumer product that didn't have its own sort of service element at a large scale. So kind of the business side of it was like, hey, you know, if you kind of put those two together, you know, you're not really reinventing the wheel. You know, shoe cleaning does exist, you know, to a large extent.
Absolutely.
But what you're doing is you're actually, you know, turning it into like a market serviceable service. So that's kind of the kind of the business direction. I mean, if we kind of went into the details of it, we'd need a lot more time.
Yes.
But that's the kind of, let's call it the kind of the business progressionary sort of periods too.
I love that you mentioned that you used to jot down a lot of your ideas. Yeah. Can you share maybe the process or things to consider when you have an idea and how to turn that idea now into a business?
So I mean, you've got your kind of ideation, you know, conceptualization stuff that's, you know, very kind of sort of typical business school type thinking about, you know, business ideas. I think in my experience, you know, it's never so linear. You know, I think that's the one thing to kind of consider, that it's not a linear, you know, process. If I kind of individuate that question, you know, my process, which I would not employ anyone to replicate because it's incredibly messy. So I'm a massive ideator. So I sit down with ideas. You know, I practically write down anything. Like I make sure my phone's right next to the shower, for example. You know, it's always on notes. So like when I get out of the shower, I'll write 3 or 4 notes.
I must add there that apparently we are most creative when in the shower. So
or somewhere else.
Okay.
In the other part of the bathroom.
Yes.
A super creative time, I can tell you. I don't know if you've tried it, but it's very creative. So I spend, you know, so my process really is like, you know, firstly empty your brain. You know, so put things on paper, and you constantly revisit, you know, like your ideas and juxtapose them against the market. You know, so don't sit down with ideas and kind of ideate in isolation. Like you've got to really kind of, you know, study what's around you, read the papers, read blogs, you know, follow sort of trends or threads that are kind of speaking to what your idea is. But constantly go back to it, revisit it. And I think from that perspective, you know, once you've gained an idea of what you want to do, you know, I have this sort of barometer of confidence level, I call it, right? So, you know, I operate at 70%, you know, once I have 70% clarity, you know, I then execute, and I'll find the other 30%, which I call like true conviction. Right, so that 30% you'll find as you build. Yeah. You know, so like I think maybe one piece of advice is don't wait until you're 100% certain, because you'll never be. Like I'm still not 100% certain of Sneaker Shack, and we, you know, 12 stores in, you know, I still have doubts. Yeah. Which is what gets me up and kind of like, let's reiterate, let's remodel, let's rework. So don't. The big thing is about, you know, not getting into a perfection paralysis. I would say
70% good enough. Let's get started.
70% good enough. But also, I think another secret of mine is kind of using the rule of first principle. You know, so what is absolutely true about the thing that you're building, and what is absolutely not true, right? And then juxtaposing that against, you know, what that opportunity is. forget the sizing stuff. How big is the market? How big is it? Like, is this a thing that can derive true value from the market? And if you were that person, like, if you're trying to build something that you won't use as a customer, forget about it. Like, it's always
the drive is not there.
I mean, I wouldn't say drive, but the expectation for someone to want to use 100%. it is a lot lower. And I guess to some extent that does impact drive. But I think you're only effectively building something that you truly know, right? So if you don't really know it and you think that this is something that would work, and you don't have an intimate knowledge about it, I think it's not impossible. It just makes it harder. So like, I think if you look around look around your world, and you kind of trying to figure out problems to solve in your world, you stand your probabilities of success are a lot higher.
Let's talk about funding, which I think is quite a big stumbling block for a lot of people. But how do you then secure investment for an idea, especially with no proof of concept? And in your case, where did you get your funding from?
So, have you got friends, family? I think that's naturally the kind of investor chart, would start with, your friends and family. And this is generally in the stages where you don't have, a track record or anything like that. There is no proof of concept or, what they call a sort of product market fit. Effectively, it's investing in an idea.
Yes.
Right. So you're sitting here, I have an idea. I've put it on paper. It's going to need some money. There's no institution that's going to go
prepared to give you
that's going to go
a large amount of money.
Yeah. So I think typically that's where a lot of your network around friends, family. This is my idea. Like it's your first roadshow. And if you can't, and careful of the parent that just loves you to bits and just says, hey, whatever you need, here you go. That's not gonna, I think you need, those friends and family that will test your idea, take you through your business plan, and they're actively making an investment. That's certainly how I kind of began. I did have a business, parallel to this, before beginning Sneaker Shack that, I had been running that had been doing pretty well, and I just kind of, self-funded it really, so I didn't really kind of, I kind of spoke to my parents about it, but I think essentially it was my in Sneaker Shack's term, that was my funding that kind of.
But some people don't have that. They don't have the friends. They don't have the family to invest or to assist them with funding or financial aid. What would happen?
Yeah, and I think that's the. I think that's the tough one here, right? And I think it's something that is hugely recognized, around that. That access to capital remains a massive question, and we have programs, incubators, that aspiring entrepreneurs, join, and all these, sort of like, different vehicles. The effectiveness of them is still sort of in the air. It's a big question mark on whether they actually work or not. So that remains a problem to be fixed. Like, access to capital is, one of the sort of key questions.
It's a big one.
Equally, like, youth unemployment, right? We have to improve the mechanisms in which, young business people can gain access to capital. I'm not going to sit here and try to answer that question as if like, I'm so deeply involved and I can just sort of, the sentiment as a highlight, like, I think, there's a ton of work that needs to be done in
100%.
that perspective. Yeah.
So, of course, any business, especially when starting, goes through a couple of bumps. What were some of the challenges that you went through when you started, and how did you overcome these challenges?
Okay, I mean, maybe just like stick to the big ones, because there are 1,000 small ones.
I can imagine.
We had a big one this morning. I think, my philosophy of business is that, what is a business essentially? Is it the piece of paper that you've registered the company on? No, I mean, not really. That's just a piece of paper. Is it the idea itself? No, that's ethereal. It's kind of conceptual. It's everything else that puts that together, and that's where, you kind of equate that out. What you get is people. So like, getting the right people in to kind of, start building your business with, whether it's, if you're a founder and, you're looking for a co-founder, we had a lot of challenges in trying to figure out, who are the right people, being branch managers of, different aspects in the business. But I think we're slowly getting it right, as we sort of really hone down in this culture of hiring right. I think another one in Sneaker Shack's perspective, people didn't believe in this idea of like, you know, oh, this is a whole thing just for sneaker cleaning. Like, so, you know, that's all you do. And we're like, yeah, like we have the thesis on this. Like, I think, you know, if you look at, you know, if you project this out, and then we're talking about 5 years ago, you know, and a lot of the people that you're convincing are landlords, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, they need to take a bet on like signing a 5-year lease with you.
Trusting that you'll be able to
that,
pay
like,
them every month.
Yeah, like, okay, so like, listen, like, don't care about what we're doing. Like, if you get your rent, you should be happy, right? And
exactly, quite frankly.
Exactly. So like, I think doing a lot of that convincing, you know, I think you kind of learn that, you know, not everyone's going to believe in you in day one, and that's okay. Like, if you have that conviction and it's backed by data, then, you know, you should be able to chart ahead. And then I think there's a whole bunch of, you know, other small ones, you know, negotiations, you know, I think strategies around, you know, like launching, you know, and, you know, campaigning, marketing is, you know, is a huge thing.
Yes.
You know, how do you get that right? You know, yeah, a whole host. But, you know, there's I think there are always solutions to, you know, those problems. But and the problems aren't things that you want to kind of shy away from. I think those are the things that really like propel the business. You know, especially if you know, have a positive outlook to how you deal with problems. You know, it's always an opportunity to do something better.
I'm sure you got a bit of anxiety though when you had these people who were questioning this concept and who kind of like didn't believe it. I mean, of course you believe it, it's yours, but when there's also negativity and people are like, really? It does give you a bit of anxiety, I would imagine, that, what if it doesn't work out? But when it does, which in your case it did, I suppose you did a bit of a happy dance, eh? Yeah,
I mean, you definitely have those nights when you get home and you're like, okay, you know, just the bottle of wine and
yes,
just sitting outside, and you're like, okay, like what the hell am I doing here? You know, and I think that's natural. It's human, and I think, you know, like the kind of that next morning you kind of wake up and you go back to your first principles. You know, and you know, this is why, you know, guys like Simon Sinek speak very, you know, highly up, you know, of, you know, you've got to begin with the why. You know, like really going back to like, why am I doing this? You know, and then you kind of motivate yourself back into that sync of the opportunity that you're seeing, you know, the kind of game that you're playing. You're able to ignore, you know, the other noises. You know, at those times, or in being in that place, you really learn how to insulate yourself in your world, in your existence, in what your idea is, and anchor yourself there, and then kind of you draw the world towards that, as opposed to kind of, you know, going out and trying to appease the world and like, okay, I promise it'll work, look at this, look at that. That's exhausting.
Yeah,
that's exhausting. If your sort of key principles are good, and you know that your product's good because it's backed by data, not by opinion. You know, like my mate said, this is great. No, like, you know, like how do you quantify that? You know, so I think once you build that sort of, you know, base of conviction, it's a great shield to kind of you know, mitigating those wine nights. You know, I mean, you can have wine nights, but not because
maybe gin here and there.
Yeah, maybe gin.
So, as the founder and CEO, how do you ensure that everybody you work with embodies the meaning and purpose of the brand across the organization? Culture
is multifaceted in the sense that, you know, there are certain aspects of your culture that, you know, has to be, you know, top down. You know, especially in the beginning, you know, you kind of, you know, you as founder and CEO, your essential job is to set the mission, and then, you know, make sure that the mission is staying afloat. You know, and although as a founder, you know, you begin and you have 100,000 jobs, at each point you fire yourself from all these jobs until you have one left. And that job is just to make sure that the company is following its mission and philosophy. I think, you know, that's the one approach, and then I think the other approach is your bottom-up approach, right? So, you know, I think a strong culture is also based on, you know, the people that are in your business. Are they heard? Are they being attended to? You know, do they have ideas? Are the ideas being implemented? You know, are they part of shaping the organization or the business or the company? And, you know, incorporating that with the overall mission. I think that's how you kind of arrive at, you know, a really good culture. Like you can't be sort of too bottom up, and you can't be, you know, top down. I think finding a good balance between the two. And I think as it grows, you know, I think, you know, now I think we employ about, you know, close to 70 people.
Sure.
You know, so it's a very important that you have that like really set in stone, you know, and I think we, part of the ways that we sort of try to keep it alive is that, we place a lot of emphasis on like just revisiting ideals of the company, why we're doing what we're doing. I think we're only learning to actually get a lot of the team involved in the marketing stuff, what do you think of the strategy? What do you think of the strategy? And often branch managers in stores will really tell you this is what customers get excited about. This is what customers get excited about. And really honing some of that, insight into actual perspective and from perspective into actual material, branch managers or whatever, they get super excited when they start saying, oh, that was my
getting them involved
and seeing that it's really gone from my idea to an actual Sneaker Shack campaign. I think that's it's getting your team involved is a key aspect to kind of driving good culture.
And it keeps them excited and they want to come to work and they want to work for this organization. Absolutely love it. Sneaker culture often involves quite a strong community. So how does your business engage with the sneaker community, and what roles does community play then in your brand?
The sneaker community is huge.
It is.
I think it's what we've learned, because the sneaker community is huge. How do you define the sneaker community, right? It's a massive question, because then you have sneakerheads, you've got people that are very interested in sports, that are just spending a ton of money on sneakers.
Yes.
There's kind of mom and dad who have really cool children who now also join this idea of wearing Jordans. So I think it's a huge community, and I don't think there's a sort of one answer of addressing the idea of sneaker community. It's so multifaceted, and I think the approach that we kind of as we learn this, the approach that we've now taken is kind of, we look at sneakers more, or sneaker marketing, Sneaker Shack marketing, more and more as Red Bull, for example.
Okay.
So if you consider Red Bull, what is Red Bull? It's a beverage. It's just a drink, right? But from a product placement and a marketing perspective, it's a Formula One. Kind of fan of Formula One. It's a skateboarding brand. It's a breakdancing brand. It's everything that it represents a certain culture, but under the sort of banner of Red Bull. So Sneaker Shack is the same. We could be hugely behind people that are preparing for comrades and very active on their shoes, and also the guy that's just super collector. And I think we're developing into a brand that is uniquely speaking to all these markets just because of its vastness. So I think our approach to it now is to kind of Red Bullify. I'm just going to coin a term. I'm just going to Red Bullify a lot of the strategy. And we can edit that out if that doesn't make sense.
And there's also the Dubbzes of this world who just decide to get their sneakers dirty and keep them in their closet long.
We'll speak to you too. We'll have a strategy.
Am I also there? Am I part of the culture? Thank you.
You're part of the culture. You're a consumer, and I think when you buy, I think the way I would sort of flatten it out into kind of a first principles perspective is, if anyone that makes a meaningful decision in selecting a pair of footwear and pricing it and being incredibly, whether it's functionality or fashion or whatever it is. But you're making a conscious decision on your purchase, you're part of a community, and affiliation to brand, or so I think it's broad, and it's what it's taught us. It's sneakers aren't just about sneakerheads. It's actually, if you really want to quantify it, is sneakerheads occupy less than 5-10% of the total market.
Wow.
So it's outside of the although it represents a holy grail, of the sneaker world, the sneaker community is much broader. Yeah.
So any partnerships, collaborations your business has formed maybe with other brands within the sneaker industry?
Yes. We've had a pretty intense, so I kind of mentioned earlier that we had a very busy morning.
Yes, you did.
So we've just been onboarded onto the Virgin Active Rewards platform as part of their partners for weekly rewards, and that's the latest one, which has been amazing. And I don't want to say too much because we're still working on it. It's been too good. In other words, a lot of the stores have been inundated, with sneakers. We have other partners like Yaga, who have been really great to us, and many more in the pipeline as we continue to grow.
So before I let you go, tell me, what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to start their own business?
I think it's important to try to be as honest with yourself as possible. I think that's the first thing. Like try to remove as much of the fictition of success and be pragmatic about the idea itself. So spend a lot of time scrutinizing the idea itself and probably your ability to actually execute on it, because it's going to save you a lot of time. So I think that's the first like piece of advice. And I think once you've been through that, like, get started. I think a lot of people do sit. I myself, I sit in ideation for a long time. Execution is your best friend. So make that list of things, of to-dos, get through them, as diligently as you can, and work on conviction, because you're going to face a lot of haters, right?
Amongst other things.
So work on your conviction and try to base your conviction as much as you can on actual information, and theory, if you will, and things are going to go wrong. It's inevitable that things are going to go wrong, and try your best. I mean, the old adage is just try not to give up even when things are going bad.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Very insightful. I had a great time. I'm excited to bring through my sneakers.
Please
So,
do.
well, there we go. I think one thing I can say is that entrepreneurship is not just about building a business, but it's about pursuing your passion, and execution is everything. So if you know that you are interested in starting a business, I think Lolo gave us some great insights that are golden. So take them and use them. Until next time, stay hustling and stay positive.